I got molested in the little boy's room.
Well, hello everybody. Hello Patrick. Welcome to another episode of Revenge of the Drive-In. Today we'll be discussing Dawn of the Dead from 1978, the very famous, influential zombie movie, and Night Killer from 1990, which is perhaps an infamous movie?
Less famous, less influential. Infamous, I don't know. But yeah, Night Killer is, of course, an Italian film. Dawn of the Dead kind of is, too, in its own way. But anyways, I don't know if you introduced yourself, but this is Jim.
Oh, yes.
First.
Hello, my name's Jim.
So let's start with Dawn of the Dead. George A. Romero's classic semi-sequel to Night of the Living Dead, made 10 years later.
Yeah, well, and they were saying that he made his movie 10 years later because he didn't want to be known as, like, the horror guy, apparently. But I just think he didn't really find a place he wanted to film another zombie movie in.
Well, yeah, he has stated that the shopping mall, the famous shopping mall, was kind of the start of planning for the movie. The shopping mall's in Monroeville, which is outside of Pittsburgh, and he was like friends with the owners of the mall, and he remembers them taking him through like the parts of the mall that no one would go to, the backstage areas, so to speak, where the characters end up hanging out. That was a set because he said it wasn't big enough to shoot there. But then he was kind of thinking like, if we were to do a zombie thing, this would be a pretty good place to hang out if you're trying to survive zombies. So the mall was like the
impetus.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know if he ever really wanted to make a sequel so much. He claims no one really approached him ever about making it.
It's interesting that the zombie is kind of like the last horror movie villain, I guess you could call. You know what I mean? Like you do have some slashers at this point. You do have movie monsters. Movie monster, I guess, is the term I'm looking for. It's interesting that the zombie is the last kind of movie monster to enter that famous pantheon of movie monsters.
Absolutely. And you say movie monsters, but really just monsters, because like the vampire, that stuff all predates movies by centuries. As far as like a class of monsters, werewolves, vampires, zombies, this is the one that has like a specific creator we can point to in Romero, in Night of the Living Dead, because yes, zombies existed in Haitian folklore. It's mentioned in this movie even that Ken Foree's granddad was from, I think he says Trinidad, but the zombie as we know it today is a Romero creation, undoubtedly.
Well, and also too, zombies are kind of the perfect monster because you can create a movie or a story around even just like one zombie, and then that multiplies exponentially. And the thing with zombie movies is that they always wind up apocalyptic because that's what they are. They're the bringers of an apocalypse, essentially, right?
By the way, do you think if there were to be an actual zombie outbreak, let's look just at America here for a second. Do you think it could ever get to a point where it is apocalyptic given the strength and might of the United States military? I have my doubts.
No, I don't think. I think, especially in today's day and age, where zombie movies exist and people know about zombies, if actual zombies were to rise out of the ground, I think the American military machine would be very quick to put them down.
I think so too. I do like that this movie, with the raid on the apartment, does kind of show something that there would be elements that would make it difficult, because there would be certain cultures, certain communities that don't do what they're told, and that's something that we saw. Not to draw a comparison between a zombie outbreak and COVID, but that is something that, like, I remember reading stories, seeing videos about like NYPD raiding these like Jewish centers of these like Hasidic Jewish communities that refuse to wear masks, refuse to not hold large gatherings and stuff like that. And we see that in this, I think it's supposed to be like a Puerto Rican apartment building, and they're not properly disposing of the bodies. They're just like keeping them there because they're still trying to honor the dead in some way.
Yeah, it is actually funny because you can
It's tough to say they're Puerto Rican because it's a lot of white guys in brown face, but I think they're Puerto Rican.
Well, there's also a dummy in blackface too. that gets its head blown up.
Yeah,
with a Taliban-esque beard.
Yes, yeah, that's fair.
But no, it is interesting that you can draw lots of comparisons between the pandemic that we recently went through and this movie. And I just want to make one final point before we actually get into this. When The Walking Dead was at its height, the TV show, I had friends who were super into the show, and I would say, it's a dumb show, I don't want to watch it. Like, I watched the first season and maybe part of the second, and I was like, like, it's okay, it's a zombie show. And they would always be like, no, it's so much more than that. It's about people interacting with people, overcoming issues that other people have created. And it's like, you know what? Let's not fucking pretend that this is some kind of high art or like high type of storytelling, you know? It's a zombie show about zombies attacking people, and there are shitty people. And I think that Romero knew that it wasn't like some kind of like a high art, because there's lots of scenes that are clearly him just like joking around or doing silly things, you know? Because
and a lot of that's Tom Savini. A lot of that's Tom Savini fucking around too. But yes, I do think Romero talked about when he wanted to. I was actually surprised to hear him say this. I listened to the DVD commentary track for this Anchor Bay DVD from before when the remake came out, because they made a joke about Romero's wife said, I don't think they could remake this today, and then everyone started laughing like they're working on it or whatever. So Romero said when he would write these movies, he didn't really care about the characters. He kind of thought all of that stuff would come later, and it might even come from the actors. Like, he really focused on the themes. Mm-hmm. And so I also got from him saying that is that he did not necessarily, when writing this movie, intend this to be a pie-in-the-face, gag-a-minute zombie romp.
Yeah.
But, and that kind of came from. There's really interesting stories about behind the scenes, because the majority of the movie is shot in this shopping mall. And how they did that is they shot in the middle of the night. So you have people who are, deprived of sleep. You have zombies showing up drunk because the latest thing anything was open in the mall was that Brown Derby bar and steakery that they run by several times. And it said
Love Pub on it too. Did you see that? LUV
Yeah,
Pub.
Something like that. By the way, I looked that up. That's still an existing chain. It has 3 locations in Ohio. It apparently used to have like dozens, if not hundreds. But that was the latest thing open, and a lot of zombies would show up there in zombie makeup, getting ready, towards the end of the mall being open, getting ready to shoot, and they would get drunk and they would show up, and they actually think that kind of helped the movie because the zombies, they can't really take direction. They're kind of just doing their own thing.
That's pretty funny. Okay, well, I guess to finally get into this, in the very beginning of the movie, in the opening, we're introduced to Fran, who I guess is like she works at like a news organization.
She works for, you see George Romero cameoing in the director's booth, whatever you would call that of the news. That's his wife next to him.
Oh, okay. The whole scene is chaotic. This zombie pandemic, apocalypse has started.
I love the chaos. It's just the sound mixing. It's just a bunch of people yelling. I don't know what's going on. Like, it's a bunch of like, oh, we lost camera 3 or whatever.
Yeah,
like
we'll turn on camera 2.
No one knows.
Yeah,
no one knows what the hell's going on. It's just a scramble to even shoot whatever it is they're shooting. Yeah,
which is just 2 guys sitting and kind of yelling and arguing at each other because the world is falling apart around them. And in the center of this, Steven, a.k.a. Flyboy.
A.k.a. Hugh Laurie.
Yeah. He comes up to Fran, and you later find out Fran is pregnant, spoilers, so I guess they're seeing each other.
I'm amazed at how little of the film focuses on that. I don't think we ever see them kiss or share anything that looks even semi-romantic.
No, at one point they're in a bed.
He is the one that reveals to the other characters that she's pregnant. So by nature of him knowing that, I assume he's the father,
Yeah.
But the film doesn't really care too much about that.
No, exactly. And Flyboy, which I'm going to call Steven that from now on because it's such a great nickname, he shows up and says to Fran, hey, we got to get out of here. Everything's going to shit around us. The helicopter's all fueled up. And Fran's like, well, we can't just leave. And this guy at the station is like, you can leave whenever you want. We're going to be closing down at midnight anyway, so there's nothing else we can do.
Yeah, and they're in a few references to they're in Philadelphia, I guess.
Yeah, and then we cut to like a SWAT team or something. Also in Philly, right?
It's actually shot in Pittsburgh, but yeah, it's in the same city that the other characters are.
Yeah, and and they're raiding this low-income apartment building.
There's some racial slurs.
Yeah,
there's
this one like piggly cop who is very racist, and he's just shooting colored people on sight. He's like, are you a zombie or not? I don't care. If anybody could be that Danny DeVito,
to be fair,
meme,
I mean they
him.
are shooting non-zombies because there are Puerto Rican men shooting back at them.
That is true,
including Martin himself in a comical wig, John Amplas, who plays multiple roles because he's also the zombie that Ken Foree throws over the balcony.
Oh,
it's a dummy when he throws it, but that is John Amplas as well.
Yeah, well, these cops are going in and shoot, and we're introduced to Roger, who's a cop, and he's kind of seeing what's going on around him, and he's really, at this point, he's kind of like, I need to get out of society. Also, some of these cops really fucking suck.
I've never been more certain someone would grow up to be bald.
Oh, 100%. I feel bad for the guy.
That is a terrible hairline.
Yeah, I feel really bad for him. There's this great head exploding scene where the racist cop barges into one of the apartments, and then there's a guy standing there with a gun, and he just blows his head off with a shotgun.
Yeah, and I love it. The dummy head is so obvious because the shot is too long.
Yes, yeah.
Tom Savini claims that is his first head explosion based on how they were talking about it. They started shooting the movie. They didn't have access to the mall, so this apartment building stuff is among the first stuff they shot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he claims it's his first head blowing up, which he does in The Prowler, he does in Maniac. So,
which, to be honest, it looks great.
It does look great. It's just the dummy itself doesn't look great, but the head explosion looks great. And that was a real shotgun they fired. Because
so
cool.
I
assume most dummy head explosions are accomplished with some kind of like explosive device, or like a firecracker or something. But no, this is a very independent movie. We'll just fire live rounds at this dummy. It's great.
I was going to skip over, but famously, that's the dummy that was going to be used at the end of the movie, and they put
and we're not spoiling anything because that's an ending they didn't go with, so. Yeah, because originally the ending was going to be Galen Ross, the main actress. What was her name?
Fran.
The character?
Fran.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
Yeah, well, she was going to stand up into the helicopter blades, and the top of her head was going to get sliced off. And then when they decided to change the ending, they were like, well, hey, let's use this dummy and this dummy head for this. Let's just
But we still
beard on it.
Get a helicopter beheading, kind of.
Yeah, we do. That's pretty...
I don't know if we'd quite call it a beheading.
No, but...
More like a...
Like a little... Like a scalping, maybe.
Yeah. This is also the scene where we first see our first zombie bites, and these are incredible. There's that one zombie that runs to like his wife, or the wife runs to him and embraces him, and then he takes 2 bites out of her, one out of her neck and one out of her arm, and those are insane. Those look so good.
Yeah, and you know what's really gross about them? All the bites in the movie, when zombies bite into you and they pull back, like the flesh kind of comes with the bite, and it looks like you're biting into like chicken skin or something, you know? Like it's disgusting.
Yeah, and there's something about the way they shoot it and the way they edit it. It must be it's quick enough that you don't notice it's a fake arm or something, because it has to be a fake arm. Mm-hmm. Those shots look so good. Overall, this movie isn't Tom Savini's best work because they didn't have a lot of time. The zombies themselves don't look great. It's just a lot of gray face paint, basically. Mm-hmm. But the actual gore effects are amazing.
Oh, absolutely. And the blood looks great, too. It's that bright kind of orangey red blood again.
Well, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it doesn't look great, but I like
very
the color.
Italian looking. Savini himself said that he wasn't satisfied with how the blood looks.
But anyways, in this raid scene, we also meet Peter, who is also a cop from like a different unit, and him and Roger kind of join up in the building in the middle of the chaos, and they're both kind of like, we gotta fucking get out of here. And Roger says, hey, I've got a buddy named Flyboy who flies a helicopter, and he's got it all loaded up, and I'm gonna escape with him.
Named Flyboy. I know you said you were gonna call him that,
yeah,
but Ken Foree, Peter comes up with the nickname later on, so it's like he clearly doesn't introduce him as Flyboy.
Yeah. But he's like, hey, me and my buddy Flyboy and his pregnant wife that I don't know is pregnant. We're gonna escape in his helicopter. And Peter's like, okay, great. And there's a great scene just before the gang actually meets up, where like in the basement of this apartment, they run into a bunch of zombies. They're all like tied up, and Peter just takes his pistol out and he has to shoot all of them, like one by one. And you can tell that it's like killing him because these are people or were people, and now he's just got to put them down like a bunch of wild animals.
Yeah, and this is why those characters want to get out. It is for their potential personal safety, but it is also like they are done with this. They don't want to keep doing this crap.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think the movie does a great job of showing that, a great job of showing the emotional toil, at least of these two characters. Not, eventually we get people shoving pies in zombie faces. I don't think there's a lot of emotional toil there, but... Yeah,
well, and it's funny, too, because the next scene is when all four of our characters meet up at the helicopter, at the police docks, and they're all kind of piling in, and this young cop comes up and says, "Oh, where are you guys going?"
He's like cross-eyed.
Yeah. He looked, and he's like chewing gum, like with his mouth open, like an animal.
This screams this guy's like not an actor. I mean, a lot of people in this movie, quite frankly, aren't actors, but like this guy in particular is just like, what is he doing? This is weird.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, he's like,
hey, you guys got a cigarette?
And he's like, where are you guys going? Chewing gum.
And he's like cross-eyed, and he's like looking right into the camera. He's like breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah, but he says, hey, me and a bunch of cops are going to get into a boat, and we're going to go to an island, any island, really, and see if we can hold out. And our gang is like, okay, good luck. And he goes, hey, do any of you guys have a cigarette? And everybody says, oh, no, we don't have any. And as soon as they take off in the helicopter, like Fran and I think Fran and Roger light up cigarettes. And like it's funny, but it's also like, oh, Romero does a good job of showing how shitty people can be to other people in the middle of an apocalyptic situation.
Yeah. Just that this is an idea. This is to a certain extent every man for himself.
Yeah.
This is when they're flying over redneck country.
I love it.
In the center of Pennsylvania. This absolutely feels like an extension of the end of Night of the Living Dead. This feels, like, even though it's obviously colored, Night of the Living Dead's black and white, it feels like it's similar locations in the countryside.
Yeah.
And then it definitely feels like they're saying something about, like, because we see it out there and it's got the energy of a tailgate. There's a bunch of people.
That's exactly it.
Gathering around, drinking beer, like partying and having fun while others... like shoot at zombies. You get the military there,
and like police forces and stuff. Yeah,
that's real military. Those are real cops, because it was like the National Guard or whatever. But it's just like everyone's kind of hanging out, having a good time, and it almost seems like, why is this even a threat? But at the same time, it's like, that's so real. Like, if stuff like this were to happen, like, that would happen too. There would be people that would make a game out of
100%.
100%. As Tom Savini said, there's only so many deer you can shoot. When something that's not a deer shows up, it's like, yeah, people would go nuts for that.
Well, and it's funny too, because, compared to the city, where everything was so chaotic and truly terrifying and, nobody knew what was going on, you get out to the country, and like you said, it's like a giant tailgate party, and people are handing out hot cups of coffee, and people are cracking beers, and, like, it's all kind of silly. At one point, people are posing for a photo, and then zombies come up behind them, and then all the rednecks are like, everybody down, and they just start mowing all the zombies behind them down. Like, it looks like a lot of fun. And I think
it does. It does. It does absolutely look like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then you're kind of wondering. You're like, why is this? And as you said, you're like, why is this a threat? These people seem to be handling themselves perfectly.
But also, like, how long will that last? Like,
exactly.
You do kind of get the sense of like, yeah, it's fun now, but tomorrow they'll be overrun or something.
Exactly, and I think that's the point that they're making there. The good times aren't going to last forever. So they fly the helicopter to this little airport to refuel, and I think Flyboy leaves Roger in charge of the refueling, and the other three just kind of go off and look for supplies, whatever that may be. At one point, Flyboy and Fran get attacked by some zombies when they're in like an old barn or something, and they manage to escape. But perhaps some of the most terrifying zombies in the movie. Peter's in like this office, he's having a cup of coffee, and zombies start like banging on this locked door, so he starts shooting through the door, and then he opens the door, and it's like zombie kids run out, and they're like attacking him and stuff.
Tom Savini's niece and nephew.
No way, is it really?
Yeah, that's what he said. It was just so much fun. And apparently Ken Foree had a big problem with this scene. He didn't like that he had to shoot kids. Like, even just shooting it, knowing it's a movie, he just wasn't cool with the scene.
Well, and I can understand that.
It is pretty, like, these are not the first two zombies we see killed. These are, the 209th and 210th zombies we see killed, but it is pretty wild. Like, still, I know they're zombies, I know they're monsters, like, still making the decision that they're kids is interesting, but it also goes to show, like, one, how well they understand the situation, but two, just, like, how widespread it is, that this zombie virus does not discriminate. Mm-hmm. If it's going to be kids, it's going to be Hare Krishna people, it's going to be we see a wide variety here.
Yeah, we do. It's really neat because I think you see one other kid in the movie at one point. He's in the mall and he gets shot in the gut. But it is great. It is great because also kid zombies are just scary. Like, I always think of the 2004 Dawn of the Dead remake with the kid zombie in it, and that was terrifying.
I still haven't seen.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, okay. But anyways, the first kind of, like, group conflict.
We also get the poster zombie here.
The poster zombie?
Because, Ken Foree kills the kids, and then he's, like, on his way out of, again, that office, whatever, and a zombie comes in, and he's got the makeup from the poster.
Oh, gotcha.
And then he has to dive out of the way because he sees Flyboy aiming
a rifle right at him. And that creates the first.
He's a terrible shot at this point. Yeah, so it's Roger that steps in and kills the thing.
Yeah, and then Peter's like, hey, don't ever fucking point a gun at me again. And that's the first kind of group conflict that we get. But we see a really cool zombie kill when Roger's refueling the helicopter, and a zombie sneaks up behind him, and he just, like, turns around.
A zombie with a prolonged forehead for some reason. I wonder what's going to happen.
And the zombie climbs up on top of a wooden crate, and then gets the top of his head sliced off by the helicopter rotors. And there's just blood coming out everywhere.
Great effect. The propellers were animated, rotoscoped in later. Those were not running. And what it was is this movie, when George Romero called up Tom Savini, he's like, hey, I'm doing a zombie movie. Think of cool ways to kill people, is what he said. And Savini goes and gets this one guy that he went to college with because he thought he had a very low forehead, and he's like, oh, if we could add on to it, maybe people wouldn't notice. But you absolutely end up noticing in the movie.
Yeah.
It's like a Frankenstein kind of square forehead.
It is. That's exactly it. Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, they refuel the chopper and they keep flying, and they just come across this massive mall. And they decide to land on the roof and see if there's any supplies or anything in there. And they're looking in through skylights, and they see, like, a bunch of almost like army rations or something. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh, I guess we could hide out here for a while and live off these rations and decide what we want to do next. And they get settled in. We don't know how long they've been there for, but Flyboy's asleep, and Peter comes up with the plan. He's like, hey, you know what? There's a lot of stuff in the mall that we can use. Why don't we do a bit of a smash and grab raid down there, because the mall has a bunch of zombies in it. Not like a lot, but, enough.
Got 100 or so, yeah.
Yeah. And Roger agrees. He's like, okay, yeah, this is a great plan. So they go down, and it almost immediately backfires, because one thing that everybody in this movie does is they underestimate the sheer volume of zombies. And zombies also like to grab things. They're like raccoons, Zombies are people. They have thumbs.
They grab things and they stay holding on to them, because there's the zombie that takes the gun from Roger when they're locking them out of pennies. And then we see that same zombie a week later, and he's still holding the gun in the same exact way.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
wonderful.
Yeah, so they wind up having to lock themselves into a store, and then I think they're like, oh, well, hey, there's a top level to this store, or no, there's a ground floor to this store. Why don't we go downstairs and draw them all there so we can get back upstairs to our little hideout? Meanwhile, as they're trying to come up with this plan, Flyboy wakes up, and Fran's like, they went downstairs. And he's like, I gotta go down and save them. So he runs down, and he somehow winds up in, like, the bowels of the building, in, like, this back generator / pump room or something, where there's, like, a mall security guard zombie, and Flyboy almost gets eaten, but he escapes into the hallway, where he runs into Peter, who's like, hey, come on down here, me and Roger over here, come with us.
Yeah, don't go back up those stairs, because they will follow you. We need to keep those stairs hidden.
Oh, that's right, yeah, he was at the entrance to the hideout, right. Flyboy meets up with the other two, and they dive back into this store, and Flyboy's like, well, what do we do now? And Roger's like, well, now we get their attention. And now they're all laughing. They're like, oh, this is kind of fun. They're like, we all almost died. We all almost got a bite taken out of us, but this is fun. We're having fun.
They are having fun. I think this would be fun. I mean, yes, you're concerned for your life, but once they get into Penny's, Roger's just having a fucking ball. He's sliding down the
he loves it.
Section of the escalator, and this is also the scene too where like. So far, the only real conflict we've seen in the group has been with Ken Foree and Flyboy. But this is also when they start to respect Flyboy, because Flyboy was the one that grabbed the blueprints and the maps. He thought to do things that maybe the other characters didn't think to do. And so he can help them. They eventually find a overhead vent system that they can crawl through.
And going back to your point of that this would be fun, I agree. But you know who's not having fun? Fran.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, she's pregnant. She's a woman.
Yeah, it's 1970.
And then she gets stalked by a Hare Krishna guy eventually, a Hare Krishna zombie.
So that happens. So as the three are kind of in this department store and they're picking up goods and stuff like that to bring back up to the hideout, this Hare Krishna guy makes his way up the stairs and and into the hideout where Fran is.
What do you know about the Hare Krishna, by the way? Are they still around? I know that was like a thing in like the 70s and the 80s, because in the reason I know it is... the movie Airplane, the famous scene where he beats up on all those guys that approach him in the airport about like more nuclear power, like Jews for Jesus. He just beats up all those guys. That's why I know Hare Krishna.
Yeah, they've got to still be around because they're a cult, right?
I don't know much about them. I don't feel comfortable enough to throw the word cult out there. They might be. It's definitely an unusual or a not really a mainstream belief system, but this period in the 70s was when they were at their most mainstream, I guess.
Yeah, and they're out and about, which is why you have one as a zombie in a mall. But this fella, he makes his way up to the hideout where Fran is, and she has no weapon. She's all by herself. She's trying to escape this zombie by heading up the ladder back up to the roof, and the three men return just in the nick of time and kill it and save Fran. But she's clearly like very upset and very traumatized by the event, as she should be, to be fair. Also, I want to point out, when everybody learns that she's pregnant, she's still drinking, like, wine and smoking cigarettes.
She is smoking a cigarette in the scene where it's revealed that she's pregnant. That was wild. Again, it was the 70s. It was a different era. There's Hare Krishna zombies running around. There's pregnant women smoking. There's Brown Derby, Steakery, and Love Eatery or whatever.
Well, anyways, the gang gets a TV, and they're tuning into all these stations, and...
and Jim Croce is arguing with the one-eyed scientist.
That's exactly, yeah.
That looks exactly like Jim Croce.
I agree.
But it's this other guy. I think of this guy as I love the guy, the scientist who's on TV. He's got the eye patch. He's like Dr. Serizawa from the original Godzilla. But I love the way that guy talks. He just has this commanding presence, and he's so frustrated with everyone because he's the scientist. He's like, we've got to remain rational, we've got to remain logical, and he's suggesting like feeding the zombies like potentially are sick and are dying or maybe are dead bodies or something. But like and the other guy who's I guess not a scientist, Jim Croce, he's just maybe a politician. He's reacting to him like he's crazy and he's getting angry at them. But I'm like, this is so exactly how this would go.
Well, it is. Well, and at this point in the movie, this scientist guy, we get this little montage of zombies just kind of existing and doing things out in the world as this scientist guy on the news is narrating the situation.
Well, it's not out in the world. It's all in the mall.
You're right, yeah.
Because I always thought there's that...
there's a hockey rink in this mall.
There is a hockey rink in the mall. There's that really, really heavy shirtless zombie.
Yes.
And he's just like bumping against the glass. And I whenever I'd seen that, I always thought that there was like a pool behind him or something, but no, that's just those are the doors outside the mall.
Yeah,
because we see that guy in the mall later.
But the scientist is saying, he's like, look, you got to be careful. They're not people anymore. They're essentially wild animals.
There have been reports of them using tools, but even some animals have been able to use tools like this. That is nothing to be alarmed. These are not intelligent beings.
Yeah, really, the whole thing boils down to this point. They're not people. You have to kill them. They're no longer your loved ones. You have to put them down. But I do like this little montage of like there's a zombie trying to play hockey, and another zombie's just
Yes.
laying on the ice, you know?
Yeah, there is one line, I think when they're flying the helicopter over the mall, they're like, why do they still go here? And there's like, I don't know, maybe this was an important part of their life, maybe there's like the vaguest recollection
Yes.
of that.
Yeah.
And I like that we do see that. We do see a zombie vaguely attempting to play hockey. That guy probably used to play hockey at that mall all the time. And we see the Hare Krishna zombie. He was probably walking around the mall telling
Canvassing.
people about the Hare Krishna movement.
Yeah.
And like all of this, they are vaguely doing what they did in life.
Yeah, which also comes back as a plot point later. But I think this is also the point. So the three men come up with a new plan, and it's to make them all safer by wheeling a bunch of big rigs that they see in like a parking lot a couple 100 yards from the mall. They want to wheel them in front of the main doors to block the entrances of the mall. And all three of them are kind of like, okay, great plan, and break. And Fran comes up, and she's very upset. I guess this is after they realize that she's pregnant, and she goes, look, I have 4 things I need to say. One is, I don't want you to treat me any differently because I'm pregnant.
Don't leave me without a gun.
Yeah,
That's
don't leave me
definitely one
without a
of them.
gun. I want to be
learn how
informed
to
of
fly
all
the
plans.
helicopter.
Yes, and that
Yeah.
one, yeah. I want to be informed of all plans because I'm part of this group, and I want to learn how to fly the helicopter in case anything happens to Steven. And the other 2 men are kind of like, yeah, whatever. That's fine. It's Steven. She's your problem. So you agree to this.
No, Peter says those are like, that's like a good idea though, specifically about the helicopter one. Like at first, Steven Flyboy is like, he just kind of rolls his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Then Peter Ken Forey is like, she's got a point, dude.
So the 2 cops, they go up to the roof, and like Flyboy's down there. He just looks so pissed because he's got to quote unquote deal with his woman during the apocalypse, you know? So their plan starts happening. I guess Flyboy flies them to where all these big rigs are, and both Peter and Roger hop into separate trucks. They both drive to the mall. Roger parks a truck in front of the doors, and he hops out into Peter's truck, and then Peter drives him back. So you're kind of like, oh, okay, they're going to keep on doing this until all the doors are sealed. Well, on the second trip, Roger has to hotwire the truck, and a bunch of zombies kind of come out of the woodwork. Flyboy can't warn him because he's in the helicopter, and he's trying to warn him by bringing the helicopter lower to the ground, but Roger never looks up. And all these zombies are like quickly surrounding his truck. So he flies over to Peter, and Peter realizes something's wrong. So he spins back, and he gets back just in the nick of time to save Roger. Peter's like, are you okay, man? And he just looks fucking wired, eh, Patrick? He's just like, he looks like a wild man. And he's like, I'm good, let's go.
This was weird because this is the scene where his kind of casualness is what kind of leads to what happens to him. And yet it kind of seems like it comes out of nowhere. It's just all of a sudden he's just like, I know he was kind of having fun in Penny's. I mentioned he's sliding down the escalator, but this, like, all of a sudden he just like seems like he's a different character in this scene.
Yeah, and you almost wonder, like, is he supposed to be going kind of crazy because of everything, or was he always like
I don't
this?
even necessarily think it's that. I think they're just trying to, this is what leads to his downfall, but it's just we didn't have a slow build up to this.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens. Like, he's in the scene when they're parked at that private airport, he's cool and collected in that scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's got to be just like he's got Mad Max syndrome, where as soon as society begins to collapse, he goes crazy. And you're right, this does lead to his downfall, because when he parks the second truck, he very narrowly escapes being eaten by a bunch of zombies. And Peter says to him, he's like, hey, are you going to be cool? Because you're creating problems, and if you're not going to be cool, you're going to lead to your death and mine. So they drive away, and then...
But then he realizes...
Yeah, and then he realizes he's forgot his bag, which I'd just fucking leave the bag, dude. But yeah, so they go back for the bag, and he gets it, but he gets bitten twice by zombies. Like, one in the arm and one on the leg.
And Fran almost saves his life here. Fran does shoot a couple zombies off. She's just on the roof.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they know that she's helping them.
No,
but
I don't
she
think
is
so.
Absolutely super important in this scene.
Well, yeah, because she saves him the first time, when he's climbing into the
Yes,
truck.
exactly.
And then when he has to get his bag, that's when it all kind of goes to shit. They bring Roger back and they patch him up, but they're like, I don't know how long he's going to last. And there's like a line, I forget who says it, but somebody's like, oh, I've never seen one last more than 3 days after being bitten.
Yeah, that's Peter.
Okay, yeah.
That says that, yeah.
They kind of go back to normal life in the mall for a while. Roger's incapacitated, so he's being rolled around in like a wheelbarrow that they have, like this wheelbarrow cart thing.
Yes.
You know, which is pretty fun, I guess. But The moving trucks plan is clearly too dangerous, so they come up with a new plan, and they're just going to lock the main doors and turn the alarms on. So in case the zombies do break in, the alarms will go off, which they managed to do.
And also
this.
kill all the zombies that are inside while they're doing this, of course.
Exactly, yeah. So that they can have the whole mall to themselves. And they succeed in the plan, so now they're kind of free to do whatever they want within the mall. We see them collect like a bunch of food, and they're playing video games in an arcade, and they steal a bunch of money
They do raid
from
the gun
bank.
store prior to this, of course, but it's worth noting. So I've heard that if you go to this mall now, you will be very disappointed that none of it looks like it did in Dawn of the Dead. Mm-hmm. The Brown Derby is gone. The ice rink is gone. The ice rink was some of the things in the mall were not shot at the mall, i.e. all of their stuff in their little apartment. That was a constructed set somewhere. The gun store was also not in the mall, which makes sense. I don't know if you'll actually see a gun store in a real mall. Although this is Western Pennsylvania, I believe I saw a drive-through gun store in the Pittsburgh area at one point when I was up there. So, if it's going to be anywhere in the country, it might be Western Pennsylvania. But by the way, the gun store, when they get in there, there's just like African game on the walls and stuff
and like
that, like gazelles
tusks.
and stuff. And also, did you catch the soundtrack at that store? It's just like jungle noises.
Yeah,
Like, what the hell is
I was
this?
like, oh my god, why?
Was that actually in the store, or is that for the movie? I wonder.
That's a good question. I'm going to chalk it up to it being the actual store itself.
I would hate working there. It's just like Rainforest Cafe soundtrack at this gun store.
Do you think they have a thunderstorm part too, just like the Rainforest Cafe?
And the gorilla animatronics in the store.
Well, all the fun times do come to an end because Roger takes a turn for the worse. Mm-hmm. And he asks Peter, he says, hey, can you kill me? Because I don't want to be walking around like one of those fucking zombies. Mm-hmm. And Peter's like, okay, I don't want to, but I will, obviously. The scene that he actually...
He's like covered in his bed sheets, and then you just kind of slowly see him kind of rising from there.
Yeah.
And then when we get the reveal of zombie makeup...
It's pretty funny.
Well, he's got like a funny expression on his face, and he just like the way he's just doing like a side eye. It just looks kind of funny.
Yeah. I know, yeah, it's not really scary, but it's kind of pathetic.
No, it's not. And I like that this isn't. It's not a surprise that he's becoming a zombie. Like they know it's going to happen. I like that, and it's more about the existential. Like I have to kill my friend than it is about. Oh my God, he became a zombie. It's just like he's just kind of got to mentally and emotionally prepare to pull the trigger.
And he obviously does pull the trigger, but I think what's interesting about
he doesn't even get out of bed. The zombie does not last long.
He just sits up and he gets blown away. But I think what's interesting about this scene is, again, the news is on, and that scientist guy and Jim Croce are sitting there, but they're both fucking skunked. Like, they're drunk, and they're arguing about zombies and stuff.
Listen, these zombies is badder than old King Kong, meaner than a junkyard dog, man. We gotta put these things down.
Yeah. That's
all of the stuff in the mall seems like crazy fun when they're just hanging out at the arcade. When Fran and Flyboy are on their date and Ken Forey brings them their food. I assume that's the Brown Derby there.
Yeah.
All that stuff seems fun. You'd go ice skating if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like a
it
blast.
all like seems so much. Here's a question. I thought about this. Think of when was the last time you were at a mall?
About a month ago.
Because malls are dying nowadays, unfortunately, or fortunately. I'm not emotionally attached to malls. I don't really care. But think of your local mall. Mm-hmm. What stores would you most want to hang out there if you're like a last man on earth apocalyptic scenario? You have a free run of a mall, all the power's working. Where would you go?
There's really not that many good stores in my mall here.
Isn't there like a Suncoast Media at at the Frontenac Mall?
Oh, dude,
I don't think it's Suncoast, but it's. Oh, did they? Okay.
Well, they tore down the center.
It kind of seemed like it was on its last legs when I was there.
Yeah, it was. They tore down the center of it. They're building a big high-rise there now. But the Mandarin Chinese buffet's there, which is great.
Okay, they had a neat... I don't think it was Suncoast, because I think Suncoast has very, very few locations, but it was a neat like DVD, CD, record store there, I remember.
Yeah. I forget the name of it.
I bought the Best of George Jones there on CD.
There was also an HMV in Cataraqui Mall. But then that went out of business because HMV went under. So then it became a place called Now and Then, and they sell vinyl and CDs and tapes.
Okay.
And a bunch of vintage stuff, which is great. But
I feel like I'm just Googling it. And then what's the other one, the Frontenac one?
yeah, Frontenac Mall.
Yeah, the Frontenac one's definitely the one I spent more time at for whatever reason. Cataraqui, I may have gone to what's the sports store there?
Sport Check, I think.
Yeah, I think I might have gone to Sport Check there at one point, and that's probably it.
Well, in that mall, in Cataraqui Mall, really the only place worth hanging out in, if there's a zombie situation, is the Bay.
Okay.
But like, there's
that would be
else
your Pennies. Like Pennies is kind of the most important store. That's where they get their hardware supplies, and that's where clothes. I like that they take all the mannequins and that's they put the mannequins in the ice rink and use them as target practice.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Steven and Fran are learning to shoot guns and stuff. I think that's really neat. I'm thinking of my local malls. The closest mall to me is not really an indoor mall. So that's a no-go for zombies. That you're not gonna hole up there. But see, I don't even think there's an arcade. I saw a pretty cool arcade at the mall in Spain that I briefly went to. And no, I think I'd just hang out at the movie theater. Let's hope it's not. Let's hope they've got something other than Borderlands to to show in the theater.
Or Megalopolis.
And that'd be kind of neat. No, I'd watch Megalopolis 4, 5, 6 times in a row. Megalopolis is amazing.
I still haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. Like, obviously, you get some decent clothes. There's a Barnes & Noble. I'd spend a lot of time at the Barnes & Noble.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we've got an Indigo in the Cat Mall, so yeah, I'd spend some time there. A Starbucks is attached, though. If they have any like pre-made brownies, I'd eat the shit out of those.
You better hurry. Those things aren't going to last.
No.
Well, yeah, because at least the malls by me, they're becoming less shopping centers and more like restaurant destinations. I don't know if that's something you're seeing in Canada.
No,
but
we have like
that's
no
a pretty
restaurants
widespread thing here.
The mall in Canada is definitely dying. Like, first off, there's far less people in Canada than there is in the States.
Well, sure.
So far less traffic. Yeah, like all malls are just kind of closing down. Stores are leaving, and the stores that are going in are like weird, like independent stores.
Mm-hmm.
That sell,
yeah, the
like...
anchor stores are dying for the most part. Like Sears is gone.
Yeah,
Boston store is gone. If you were lucky enough to have if you're in Canada, a Hudson Bay. Mm-hmm. If you're in the U.S., like a Bloomingdale's or a Von Maur or something, like one of those anchor stores, that mall's probably doing okay.
Well, in the Cat Mall, we had an HBC on one side, Hudson's Bay Company.
Black College?
Yeah. Yeah, we had the Bay on one side of the mall, and then at the opposite end of the mall there was a Sears. And then
and then there's going to be a night and day in terms of traffic,
Well, yeah,
Sears closed, but
yeah, because they pulled out of Canada like a decade ago or whatever, or a little more than a decade ago.
They pulled out of the earth. They're gone. They're completely gone. I believe Sears is.
Well, when Sears left, like that end of the mall was vacant for a while, and then it was like some Iranian dude with about 1 million rugs leased the space, and it was called the Rug Store, and you went in and he had all the rugs in like a 100 by 100 foot square on concrete, and then the rest of where Sears used to be, the 2 fucking levels to Sears, was just empty concrete and like concrete pillars. And you're like, oh cool, like, are you gonna have more rugs? And he'd say, no, we're gonna get couches though. And then you'd go in like a month later and there was like 3 couches that he had set up 500 yards from his square of carpets that you had to walk to. It was like a fucking pilgrimage to get to see these couches. Anyway, that, believe it or not, that went out of business.
That's a cool place to hang out. You just get 3 couches, a bunch of rugs. Oh, there's a Lego store at one of my local malls. That'd be fun.
Oh, that would be good.
Especially because Legos, in terms of a functioning society, like your average Lego set is like $700 nowadays. Like it's like not affordable.
I know,
so like in a world where money doesn't mean anything. In a world where money doesn't mean anything, sure, I'll take the Hogwarts set or whatever.
Yeah. I'll take the Star Wars Tatooine set, thank you. Well, anyways, we're pretty far removed from it, but I wanted to just jump back quickly to that scene of Roger being killed, because, like I was saying, in the background on the news, you have, the guy talking about nuking the cities and stuff, but everybody on the news is up in arms over it. They're all, like, yelling, everybody's screaming, and then just before Peter has to shoot Roger, everybody calms down on the news, and the scientist guy is like, we have to be rational. We have to be rational about this. And then Roger gets blown away. It was a pretty neat scene that Romero created there. Well, life kind of passes for our 3 remaining survivors. This is the part where Fran and Flyboy have their romantic dinner at the Love Pub, and and they also bury Roger in like some plot
I love
of earth
that. They
in the
bury
mall.
him in like the indoor garden area, which probably isn't real soil, I
It's
assume.
like
but
plastic
whatever.
soil.
Yeah.
You're like, this is good enough. Yeah, things seem to be going kind of well for them. You know, they've eradicated all the zombies in the mall. They're just kind of living life. There's a shot of Fran and Flyboy in bed together, but they're both kind of like awake, and they don't look like they're in
She's
love.
also been taking some flying lessons.
Yeah, he's been teaching her how to fly the helicopter. She's nailed it, I guess. You know, she's doing a good job. All of this comes to an end. Again, the good times can't be rolling forever. Some wild Mad Max-esque biker gang, see the helicopter landing, and they're like, hey, we're gonna go to this mall at night, and we're gonna see what's going on. People are hoarding things for themselves. We don't like that.
They do check in with them on the radio.
Yeah, and they're like, we've only got 3 people. We don't like it.
But
when
then
people hoard
everyone
things.
laughs.
Yeah.
It's like a group of like 40, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually a really neat shot where this biker gang starts coming down the hill towards this mall, and there's just a whole line of, like, lights.
Yeah.
And Peter and Flyboy are like, oh, fuck. Like, this is an issue. This biker gang's awesome. And I think Peter makes the remark, he's like, these guys have been living on the road, just dealing with zombies as they come. This is like a small army.
He refers to them as like a professional army. He's like, we can't fight them. We have to just close off what we can and just hide.
Yeah. So as the 2 guys are running around the mall closing the fences, the gates, thank you.
Yeah.
The biker gang's outside literally fucking throwing grenades into clumps of zombies, and they make it into the mall, and they're just wreaking havoc. Not only do they come in with their fucking bikes, and they're like tearing everything up, driving over displays, looting stores, but a bunch of zombies have followed them in now. So,
Taking sledgehammers to TVs.
yeah, for no reason. Like, it's wild. They're stealing all the, like, the silver.
Our 2 featured bikers are Blades, which is Tom Savini. They don't name them. That's just like, he's just kind of Blades because he has a sword. He has a literal frickin' Pirates of the Caribbean sword. And then there's Sledge, who's Tassos Stavrakis, I believe, who's Tom Savini's right-hand man. He does stunts and effects in all of these movies. If I'm not mistaken, it's Tassos Stavrakis' hands that come up when Betsy Palmer gets beheaded in Friday the 13th. It's definitely a man's because it's like,
'Cause they're
very
hairy man
hairy and very large hands. They might be Tom Savini's. I think they're Tassos. But yeah, he's got the sledgehammer. He's the one I think who gets shot off the sidecar at the end of that.
Yeah.
Kind of the end of the scene.
There's also Sombrero Man, too.
Oh, that's if I'm not mistaken, that's Tony Bubba.
Who's that?
Tony Bubba, who I referenced in our episode on Martin. Tony Bubba. This is true for a lot of people that worked with Romero. They ended up getting involved in the film industry, not necessarily as actors, but as filmmakers. Tony Bubba is credited with doing the sound for Dawn of the Dead. He's also a gang member. I think he's the one with the sombrero. And he's a gang member in Martin who gets shot by the police when he's doing like some drug deal or something. The majority of Martin was shot in his grandmother's house, I think. Maybe his mother's house. But yeah, he went on to be a documentary filmmaker. Galen Ross only acted in 3 movies, this, Madman, and Creepshow, and then went on to mainly be a documentary filmmaker. I noticed one of the zombies was C. Courtney Joyner, who's like a screenwriter for like schlock exploitation horror movies. Like just, a lot of just random people in the background of Romero movies got involved in filmmaking. And I don't know if Romero tutored them in any way,
Yeah, it's
or if
interesting.
that's just kind of a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, all these bikers, they're just, they're just tearing up the mall. It's all chaos. They're also fighting off zombies, and Peter's doing the smart thing. He's just kind of hiding. Flyboy sees them take a bunch of money out of the bank, and he gets really upset. He gets pretty territorial. He's like, we took this place. This is all ours. And he starts shooting at the bikers. Peter, who's somewhere else, is like, oh, fuck. Now this is a war, you know?
Because he gets shot at.
Yeah, he does, exactly. And now he has to shoot back and stuff. And Peter is probably the best shot in the movie.
Well, certainly now that Roger's dead. I mean, he is the professional gun, if you will. I mean, he's a cop, a SWAT team guy.
Yeah, and he kind of like knows what's like. He kind of understands just how things work and like how gangs work. Like at one point, he says to Roger something like,
Why? Because he's black?
"No, how dare you?" I think you already brought it up, but at one point he was like, "We can't fight these guys. Like, just let them take whatever they want, and we'll just hunker down.
Yeah, we gotta hide. We'll just stay. They don't know that little apartment area is in the mall. We can just hide there."
Yeah. So like, zombies are attacking bikers. Bikers are attacking zombies. Bikers are looting stores.
Pies in the face.
Pies in the face. Well, they throw like a jar of jam or something onto a zombie's head, and they're like, and then they get a bunch of cream pies and just start throwing them at this fucking zombie's face.
My favorite gag here, of course, and this is towards the end when the zombies start to kind of overtake the gang, but we do see it earlier. The sombrero man, for no reason, puts his arm. They're in the middle of. He puts his arm into the blood pressure machine, and then Sledge, I believe, says like, "Hey, get out of there, man! We're getting shot at," or something. And it's like, but yeah, why would he do that anyways? But then later on, when they're not getting shot at, but the zombies are starting to overrun, he does it again.
Yeah, and he gets eaten by all the zombies. Like
almost immediately.
What is happening?
That is so like. This is the 70s. We don't care. This would just be fun to do. There's no reason why that character would do that.
Exactly, yeah.
It's so funny to me.
It's just bizarre. I mean, I love it. Yeah, and as you pointed out, the biker gang does get chased out of the mall by the zombies, just because there's so many of them. And as they're fleeing, Peter shoots the sledge guy, right, off the sidecar, and he gets eaten by a bunch of zombies. And like we said, Sombrero Man gets eaten, and I forget one of them.
Tom Savini gets shot and falls over the balcony.
Yes.
Into like the pool area.
That's right, yes. And I forget who it is that we see, but one of the guys, he gets his stomach ripped open. And there's this great shot of like all these intestines being pulled out by the zombies and eaten.
Which is interesting that's the first real like. It's not the first gore. We see this movie, very few movies in history have more squibs than this movie does, but this is our first, like, disemboweling, which is really what you think of when you think of zombies, and they just tear open this guy's chest, and it looks nasty, and it looks amazing in color.
Oh, yeah.
Because we saw this stuff in Night of the Living Dead, but it was black and white. It didn't... I actually think it might be more disturbing in Night of the Living Dead, but it's a different feel. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, this is silly and over the top, whereas Night of the Living Dead was more solemn and scary.
And that soundtrack in that scene when the zombies are eating everything, and they're eating on the chicken bones and stuff, that soundtrack.
Oh, it's awful. I mean, in a good way.
We haven't mentioned the soundtrack for this movie, by the way.
Which was done by Goblin.
It's not exclusively Goblin, because they do use stock music. There's orchestral bits, including Ken Foree's superhero theme, which comes in later. But Goblin does a few tracks, and those are awesome, and they're like... There's that kind of jungle groove sound, which is really cool.
Dario Argento, did he play with Goblin, or like?
That is a great question. I have never figured this out, because Suspiria says music by Goblin and Dario Argento. I'm not 100% sure what role Argento has, but yeah, Argento here is just a producer of the film along with his brother Claudio, and he has some kind of credit on the music too. Argento's the reason this movie got made, basically. Like,
yes, yeah.
Argento reached out to Romero and is like, "Hey, let's write a zombie movie. I want to have you write a zombie movie." Dario didn't write it at all, and he's like, "We'll fly you out to Rome, hang out for a few months, write a zombie movie." And that's like, then that's when the idea, Romero had already been to the mall and was like, "Oh, this would be a fun location." Yeah, I don't know his relationship with Goblin per se. I don't know if he plays an instrument. I don't know if maybe he
just mixes
kind
it
of
or
pitched
something?
them ideas of what to do the music, if he mixed the music. I have noticed and Dawn of the Dead wouldn't necessarily be tied to this because it is an American movie, but I have noticed a lot of Italian movies from this period credit like two people for the music, and I wonder if they credit the composer as well as the conductor. But that having been said, I don't know if Dario's a conductor.
I would say he's somehow helping them produce it.
Yeah, we don't know. I can't speculate further.
So getting back to the movie, I guess we're kind of in the closing stages of this movie. The biker gang flees. There's a bunch of zombies in the mall. It's even more like the mall's just fucked up now. Like there's broken glass. Zombies are in every store. The bikers stole a bunch of stuff. The doors are blown open, and at one point, Flyboy was shot in the arm when he was hiding in the elevator shaft above an elevator. And Peter radios him and says, "Hey, we gotta get out of here. Let's go back upstairs to our little hideout." As Flyboy's trying to climb back up the elevator, a bunch of zombies swarm him and pull him down and kill him. He puts up a good fight.
He puts up a very good fight, yeah.
And he comes back as zombie Flyboy with a pistol dangling from his finger.
The best zombie performance of the movie, the way he walks with his like, twisted ankle is amazing. Great. The way the pistol's just kind of dangling from his finger. And also, if I'm not mistaken, going back to the zombies vaguely do what they did in life, he's the one who leads the other zombies through the stairwell into their apartment hideaway, right?
Yes, exactly.
So the other zombies may not have figured that out were it not for him.
No, exactly. He leads them right to the false wall that they had built over the stairwell. And Peter, at this point, I think he's already back in the apartment with Fran. And he's like, hey, like, he didn't make it back. A couple hours later, I guess, zombie Flyboy comes back. Again, he leads dozens of zombies up. As soon as he opens the door, Peter shoots him right in the head. And there's this great, like, headshot where all the blood splatters all over the wall behind him and, like, boxes next to him and stuff. As they're being swarmed by all these zombies, Peter says to Fran, get out of here, go, escape. I'm not coming with you. And she runs upstairs, hops in the helicopter and starts it. And Peter just kind of locks himself in a room with a gun to his head. And I guess the original ending of the film, he was going to shoot himself. And Fran was going to stand up and get her head cut up by the blades, right? But they scrapped that ending. Now Peter, for some reason, in the last second, he decides he doesn't want to kill himself.
The superhero music kicks in.
Oh, and it's awesome.
It really is. It's so... The music is so cheesy. This is clearly not Goblin. This is orchestral, and it's so silly, but it is like a superhero theme music. It's like Underdog, and and then he fights back and he climbs back up, and then the music kicks in again when you see him emerging from the roof.
I know, and he's just taking zombies out and dodging them, and he dives into the helicopter, and he says, I think some of the final lines in the movie are, he says to Fran, like, how much fuel do we have left? And she goes, not much. Mm-hmm. They just kind of fly away. And that's the end of the movie. Except, I do want to say, over the closing credits, there's just like a bunch of shots, like interior shots of the mall. With zombies
the song,
just...
The gonk playing that music. We hear it earlier in the movie. I don't remember when, but that it's very silly, like circus music.
Yes, yeah.
And it adds a layer of irony and satire to any zombie thing that we see when we hear it. And I don't know if the idea of, again, that's not Goblin. I don't know what the hell that is. If that's
I can tell you what it is.
The music that was playing at the mall or what?
Musical cues and selections from the DeWolf Music Library. It's a compilation of stock music scores.
Yeah, I did see that on IMDb they a few people were listed for stock music. But that still doesn't tell us what the hell it is, though. I mean, they licensed it for the movie, I guess, but I don't know what it was meant to be. Music. Yeah.
I guess we have a bit of hope for our main characters and humanity, which, to be honest,
not a whole lot.
No, but that's the way you want to end a zombie movie on, anyways. So, Patrick, what did you think of this movie?
Dawn of the Dead is an excellent film. It's not the unimpeachable masterpiece that Night of the Living Dead is, in my opinion, but I think it might be the quintessential zombie film, because when you think of zombie, you think gore, and there's not much gore in Night of the Living Dead, and in the gore that we do see is black and white. It doesn't feel the way the zombies, you think splatter, and this movie has all of that. It has, in the scene when the bikers are overrun by the zombies, that's when we see the real disemboweling. Sombrero Man with his arm and the blood pressure machine, the zombies pull him from his arm, and the arm remains tied into the blood. Yeah. Like, I love all that stuff that we mentioned, that ripping into that one guy's chest. Great stuff. All of the squibs. This movie has some of the most amazing squibs, and some of the most squibs I've ever seen. I also really like the characters. I like Steven, Flyboy. Mm-hmm. I like how he's like the weak one of the group initially. Like, he's kind of useless and borderline dangerous. He's like trying to help, but he's not good at it.
Yes, yeah.
But I like how he becomes more and more competent throughout the movie. Like, the first real sign of that is when he grabs the map / blueprint, and then like over time you see he's teaching Fran how to fly the helicopter. He's the one who, I mean, Peter has to take action, but he's the one who kind of signals to Peter that Roger's in trouble when they're hot wiring all those trucks. Like, and then he kind of still screws everything up by eventually fighting the gang. But that's like one of the strengths of this movie, though, is that these characters do just about everything right. And yet a few mistakes, a few borderline tiny mistakes at the time, are enough to unravel everything.
And all these characters are likable, too. There isn't like a shithead character among these four that you're like, oh, I hope gets eaten by a zombie.
I think Roger gets to that shithead point, but that's also like when he... And then you actually have more... You start to like him more when he's kind of slowly becoming a zombie, when they're wheeling him around. And it's just kind of... He's still useful. He still helps them, hotwires the Volkswagen that's inside the...
And he's shooting his pistol from his wagon.
Yeah, and he helps them like lock all the doors and stuff still. But no, by and large, like we basically have four main characters in this movie. They're all pretty good. And the acting for the most part is good. I think Roger, the actor that plays Roger, is maybe a bit too expressive. He's a bit too much. I think everyone else is good, but that's David David MG is Flyboy. Scott Reiniger
who's
Roger.
Who's also royalty,
I think he's
according to his Wikipedia page.
He's what?
Who's also royalty, according to his Wikipedia page. Scott Hale Reiniger, Harlan Sahib Bahadur, Prince of Gore.
Gore province? Is this in India or Afghanistan?
Yeah. And it's somehow like he had like a relative who was over there and saved a bunch of people and was like made like an honorary member of nobility or royalty or something.
Is this Roger of Arabia? Is that what's going on here? Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's news to me. But no, I think three of the four are very, very good. I'd say Ken Foree is my favorite performance. He's very mannered and in charge, but you also see the conflict that he feels of having to kill Roger, having to kill those zombies in the Puerto Rican apartment building. Like, I think he plays all of that really good.
Yeah, and in terms of the movie itself, I mean, I think first off, I agree with all of your points. Secondly, I agree with you that this is like the quintessential zombie movie. George A. Romero not only created the zombie that we know today, but this movie inspired so many other people to create zombie movies, and their zombies moved and acted just like these zombies. You have people holding up in buildings, in department stores, and whatever. He created a whole genre and a type of monster. One thing he does really well with this that a lot of modern zombie movies, I feel, don't do that well, is that, like, yes, this is a serious situation that's happening.
But I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, but he makes some of it very unserious, very silly, and it is kind of
I think
nice.
it goes a little too far in that ways at times. But
definitely the cream pie is silly. I think that could have been cut. I don't know why that was in the movie, really.
And it was cut, by the way, the European cut of this movie, which was supervised by Argento. As I understand it, there weren't like additional scenes for that movie that weren't featured in the version that we saw. The European cut cuts out a lot of that humor and a lot of that irony, and as a result, the movie was more heavily censored. Because this was the era, or maybe slightly before the era, where we would see the video nasty era in the UK, where they would cut a lot of these films. A lot of them were Italian films, you know, some of those giallo movies, those hyper-violent stuff. A lot of films would have to pass with a certain amount of cuts. Some films never ended up passing. Argento wanted this to play more like a Fulci movie, and maybe that's just him knowing the Italian audiences. It's a different sensibility than the American audiences, but I do think some of the humor goes a little too far, but at the same time, without that, I'd be curious to see how this movie plays. I am curious to see the European cut. I don't know if I would like it more.
Yeah, well, and I think like modern zombie movies, everything's too sad and too serious for too long. Like, you never get like a moment to breathe. Yeah, I don't know. I like the silly stuff. I think some of it went too far, but I also liked the time that we spent on the characters and getting to know the characters and having their own little slice of life moments.
This movie still has all of that serious stuff that you would want in a zombie movie. It just also has the goofy stuff. And it also has the characters having fun in the mall for a certain amount of time. It still has all of those dramatic moments that you would expect. It has the quiet moments. I think this is a perfectly paced movie. You do get time to breathe. You get time where there's not really much of a zombie threat and we're kind of just doing character stuff.
And you know what? And this movie at 2 hours and 7 minutes does not feel like it's 2 hours long.
I agree. I completely agree. I also think this somewhat speaks to the humor and somewhat just to the, I guess, the nature of the Romero filmmaking, but the sheer amount of gags not in the joke sense, although sometimes these are kind of jokes, but gags in terms of just the effect pieces on some of the zombie stuff. One of the most famous is the machete to the forehead from Tom Savini, which is, I'm fairly certain they just shot that in reverse. They were pulling a machete out of a head. And you see that creativity, and that's Tom Savini essentially given carte blanche, and a lot of those ideas were come up with on the day of shooting. The famous screwdriver to the ear is a great effect, and that was literally just to cover up a continuity error. They noticed that Roger's running around with a jacket, and then at a certain point he doesn't have a jacket, so it's like, oh shit, how do we make him lose a jacket? Let's have a zombie jump out at him in the middle of Penny's, and then he can kill the zombie, and the zombie will just like cling to his jacket, so he has to leave it go. And they basically said, okay, how do we want to kill a zombie? And Savini's like, screwdriver to the ear, that'd be fun. And like, and Romero, the trust he has in Savini to just go along with that, but also like the immense creativity of Tom Savini is really amazing. Like, I love the independent kind of, this movie was well planned. It had to be because they had a very strict schedule of, we only have this mall for a few hours every night. These are a certain amount of scenes we have to shoot tonight. Yeah. It had to be well planned in that sense, but also like it left them so much room to improvise certain things.
Oh, for sure. And I think if this was a bigger
that translates. You feel like you're having fun the way the filmmakers, the way the characters are having fun in the mall. You feel like you're a part of the filmmaking team almost, in a way.
Oh, for sure. I agree. But all in all, great movie.
Very much so. I think Night of the Living Dead, from a thematic perspective, is stronger. I think Night of the Living Dead is a scarier film, dare I say, maybe because we don't see pies get thrown in the face of zombies in that film. Maybe I can't get over the pies. The pies are too much. It's fun, bizarre. But it's so stupid. And the blood pressure machine. I love the blood pressure machine. Actually, one other thing I'd like to mention. I do love the creativity with the zombies. Yes, they all look kind of bland. It's not great zombie makeup. Mm-mm. It's zombies in gray face, basically. It's just a bunch of extras. But the way we can kind of see them... Again, that guy that takes the gun, and then we see him a week later, and he's still holding the gun in the same exact way. That's a lot of fun. The way we see a Hare Krishna zombie. Like, I love that kind of stuff. I love that you can kind of see... Again, they're all, like, shells of their former selves, like, in life. They're all kind of vaguely doing what they used to do. The hockey-playing zombie, who's just kind of slowly moving his stick around a couple of pucks. I really like that detail. The details good. In that. That's a lot of fun. And that's I mean, if I had to choose one word to describe this movie, this isn't typical for a horror movie. I would not use the word scary. I would not use the word disturbing. I would use the word fun.
Oh yeah,
this
absolutely.
To me is more Reanimator than it is Night of the Living Dead. It's just like a silly kind of, it has, like I said, it has serious moments. It has effective thematic and storytelling moments, but it's just a blast.
No, I totally agree.
So let us talk about Night Killer. This is an Italian film released in 1990. In Italy, it was released as Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3 because they don't give a fuck over there in Italy. It's vaguely a Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff, really just the look of the villain. There's no, dream aspect to it. There is a psychological aspect to it that, depending on how generous you want to be, might somewhat work. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it really doesn't work. Yeah, so Night Killer is, Jim, we've covered a few Italian films on this podcast. We covered Caligula, which we didn't like.
No.
And then the Italian horror movies we've done, Black Belly, the Tarantula, Deep Red, Suspiria. The House by the Cemetery is not that great either, but for the most part, we've covered very good Italian horror films. Night Killer is a glimpse into the, I don't want to say foundation of Italian horror, but definitely a big, big part of Italian horror in this era, this 80s moving into the early 90s here. Era of, you have quality Italian horror movies, and you have utter garbage, and this is in that utter garbage category. This is a film directed by Claudio Fragasso, a.k.a. Clyde Anderson. And there is input from director Bruno Mattei, who in the same year directed Terminator 2, aka Shocking Dark, as it's known in the U.S. because the U.S. has copyright law. So Rosella Drudy's an uncredited writer. Bruno Mattei is an uncredited director. Yeah, I was curious because you don't see his name in the credits, but you also don't see Claudio Fragasso's name in the credits. So like Bruno Mattei could be using a pseudonym. He would often, as director, use the name Vincent Dawn. But Bruno Mattei, worth mentioning, and kind of the Night of the Living Dead part of this, is that Night of the Living Dead is one of those, or pardon me, Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead is one of those goldmine films for Italian filmmakers to rip off. You get Escape from New York, you get Mad Max, you get Dawn of the Dead. Those are probably the three most ripped off films in Italian exploitation movies. There is a movie, so there's Zombie 2.
Okay.
In Italy, it was released as Zombie 2 because Dawn of the Dead was called Zombie in Italy, and then in the U.S., that movie's just released as Zombie because it's not a sequel. That movie is often, that's directed by Lucio Fulci, that movie is often unfairly referred to as a Dawn of the Dead ripoff. It was being worked on at the same time as Dawn of the Dead, so, and story-wise, it really does not rip off Dawn of the Dead, story-wise, setting-wise, none of that. It's really its own thing. But after that, we get a movie that has a few different titles. Zombie Flesh Eaters. Hell of the Living Dead is the title I know it as. That's directed by Bruno Mattei. It's one of the greatest schlock exploitation movies ever. It is very much a Dawn of the Dead ripoff. So much so that it uses the same score. The Goblin score for Dawn of the Dead is featured in Hell of the Living Dead. Anyways, that's a little bit about Bruno Mattei. Claudio Fragasso is probably ripping off a bunch of movies too. I'm not as familiar with him. But Night Killer. Oh, where to start?
First off, I want to just say I enjoyed this movie.
I enjoyed aspects to it. Okay, so we'll just start with the opening scene, because the opening scene is like a short film in itself. It really doesn't tie into a whole lot, but there's some kind of dance audition thing, whatever, rehearsal.
Yep.
The director of it, at certain points, it's very clear they didn't write dialogue for her, and she's like improvising, and it's a failure.
It's the worst. Yeah.
One of the dancers shows up late, she apologizes, and then she goes to go change, and that's when Freddy Krueger comes in and kills her. So Freddy Krueger, this is confusing. He's got a Freddy Krueger mask. It's got that burnt face. It's supposed to be a mask. This is not supposed to be a burned victim. This is supposed to be a mask. We see the mouth moving inside of it, so it's like there's no confusing it for, an attempt at a real thing. Mm-hmm. But his glove also looks like it's part of a Halloween costume. It's a glove with really long bugle fingers. Yeah. Bugle fingernails.
Yeah, yum.
Also seems like it's part of the costume, and yet is able to rip completely through someone's torso, both ends of it. And it's very confusing because it feels like it's the same kind of rubbery substance the mask is made of, but I guess this is super strong. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's made out of adamantium or whatever.
But yeah, so they rip through that lady's torso. Then the director goes and
after her poorly acted meltdown, she goes.
Yeah, and I'm not blaming her. I'm blaming the director. I legitimately think she's supposed to have a meltdown at them dancing poorly, and they did not write dialogue. I think that's the explanation for that scene. I think they just didn't write lines for her when she's on stage, or she just forgot them. I don't know. Yeah. But it's in the movie at any rate.
Well, then I think her acting falters again when she gets attacked by the killer. I guess she gets her throat slit. Is that it? And then and again, the rubber mask slits her throat. This is something I want to draw attention to. This movie has been considered by some horror critics, horror writers, as like this is an interesting kind of melding of slasher and giallo. This scene is where I'm like, oh, I can finally explain the difference between the two. Slasher, oftentimes a masked killer, not always. Oftentimes a mute killer, not always. Giallo, though, her elongated death scene where we just kind of see her suffer, that is giallo. That is so Italian. You see her, she gets her throat slit, and she just kind of stumbles through the hallway. She's at the top, like the balcony seats. She's trying to call out to the dancers. Of course she can't because her throat was slit. And then the killer comes at her again, and then she ends up falling
off the balcony. And I like how the shot holds on the dancers a little too long, where they're just kind of like more confused than anything.
Yeah, because we're confused too, because some random woman was killed and then another woman was killed.
Yeah. And this is the opening scene. It's the cold open. The credits come next. I also want to point out here on Revenge of the Drive-In we have the YouTube series Terrible IMDb Trivia, which again, each time I upload one of these videos it gets about 5 views, but I'm not going to stop uploading them because they're fun to me. I have one of the most frustrating bits of terrible movie trivia coming from IMDb here. It's actually in the goof section. Okay, in revealing mistakes. Okay, and at least 40% of people have voted this down, so at least there's some sane people out there. But it says, although set in Florida, the location used is clearly Virginia. Bullshit. This movie never claims to take place in Florida. They explicitly say it's Virginia Beach. We see Virginia license plates. We see, Virginia Beach police. They never say it's in Florida. Who wrote that?
No, I never heard that.
If you're going to add stuff to IMDb, make sure you watch the fucking movie. That's just a lie. That made me so angry when I saw that. No, this is set in Virginia. Unless, I were to think of like a Civil War movie or something, I don't know if I can think of a movie that's more clearly set in Virginia. They draw attention to it.
They do, yeah, you're right.
They do. So I just want to get that out of the way.
Very strange.
The rest of the movie basically deliberately lies to you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll discuss this scene. So there's the mother, Melanie Beck. She's got her kid, and she drops off her kid, her daughter. I have her name written somewhere. I'll get to that. But some guy comes to pick up her daughter. And I thought this was like an ex-husband situation, and that's what initially confused me so much. But this guy, he's just a family friend. His name is Sherman. He picks her up, and then he takes her to school, I guess. She gets a phone call from a guy with a very creepy voice, very weird overdubbing in a bar, who we only see from behind, and he's got this like kind of southern accent, and she yells at him. She's like, I told you never to call me, and you're drunker than usual or whatever. I think it's supposed to be like 8 a.m. or something. Isn't the daughter on her way to school?
No. So I was confused by this whole thing because nothing's actually explained. So what you were going to say was this guy's her ex-husband is what we discovered.
Well, no. You're spoiling the fucking movie. What? It seems like Sherman is the ex-husband because he picks up the daughter. It seems like it's like, oh, I had her this weekend, you have her now. That's what it seems like.
No, she says when he's on the phone.
But yeah, whoever she's on the phone with she's clearly in a relationship with her. It's assumed ex-husband because she says, I told you never to call me.
Well, she says, and you have a drinking problem and you keep coming home drunk. That's why we're not together anymore or something. She says something like that.
I don't think she ever says they're not together anymore. But again, the ex-husband implication comes from, I told you never to call me.
Okay, maybe that's it. Yeah, and then Sherman... He's not. You don't even know his name at first. I don't think he just takes.
I think you're right.
Her daughter, and then walks her down the street to another fucking house where a woman comes out and takes her and puts her in a car, and they drive away. And then you go, oh, where is she going? Where is she? Is she going to school? And you learn shortly afterwards that this woman is taking her to the country for some reason.
Yes, and that's why this seems like Sherman is the ex-husband, and maybe he's remarried. That's what this seems like. They do not say that, and that's not the case, but that's what it looks like, is what I'm saying.
Okay, gotcha.
And so she gets this phone call from this guy who's very funnily dubbed, and he's even more comically acted when we actually see this actor's face, because he's got a funny, dumb face, and he's got funny facial expressions. And then she gets another phone call, a more threatening one. So there's a serial killer on the loose. We already saw it in the opening scene. He's killed, I think, at this point 4 women or something. I think his MO is he rapes them and then kills them. And then Melanie gets a phone call right after she examines her breasts in the mirror, a la Monique Gabriel.
Yeah.
And the killer makes it clear that he can see her because he's like, just stay right there. I love what I see or whatever. And then so she calls the police and reports it. Police says, okay, we'll call you back in five minutes, but make sure you lock all the doors. Then she gets another phone call. It's from the killer again. The killer reveals that he's inside the house. And then when the police call, the killer's the one that answers and says, oh, that was just my wife. She was panicky, and I told her the situation's handled. So she's locked herself in the house with this killer. And the killer then comes out, grabs her, and is about to rape and kill her. And the killer takes off the Freddy Krueger mask. We do not see it. Mm-hmm. And the scene just, it ends, and then just kind of abruptly we discover, I think we see it, the reveal I think is on the news, that, the killer had her for 8 hours, and it was stopped by Sherman, a family friend, who stumbled in, and he's got like a scar on his face that when we initially see it, looks like someone just drew it on a crayon.
Yeah, it looks worse, actually. It looks like somebody drew it on with a pencil. They're like, oh, we don't have anything.
He claims, oh, I jumped in, I didn't get a good look at the killer's face, but I actually think this is after, I think we first cut to the doctor talking to the detective, but at any rate, this Sherman's talking on the news, like, oh, I came in, I stopped it, the killer gave me this cut, that son of a bitch, and he got away. I never got a look at his face. And then we also learn from psychiatrist John Williams and the detective, from the trauma, she has no memory of the killer. If she saw his face, she clearly saw his face, but she won't be able to identify him. She doesn't even know her own name or know that she has a daughter. And they have the daughter, Clarissa, go and speak to her, and there's no recognition there. Mm-hmm. So then the rest of the movie lies to us, very intentionally so, because, again, she's suffering from amnesia. She gets followed around by a creepy guy. This is clearly, again, from the weird vocal performance. We can tell that this is the guy that called her in the beginning, but they're also trying to set up that he's the killer because, he seems like a fucking creep. He follows her. He first confronts her on the road in a car, and he's like, hey, you want a drink? He's drinking while he's driving. And then she pulls into a public restroom at an apartment building or an office building or whatever. He follows her in there. She pulls a gun on him, tells him to remove his clothes, flush him down the toilet for some reason.
Yeah.
And he is the most massive bulge you've ever seen.
Oh my
God. Tightest underwear in the world.
He's wearing the tightest, it looks like a Speedo or something. And you're like, what?
And then the funniest line of the movie, of course, is after she runs out and gets in her car, he comes running out, and the guy at the desk is like, hey, where are your clothes? And he's like,
I got molested in the little boy's room.
Such a weird line.
I know, then he just takes off outside.
And then, of course, he just has spare clothes in his car. We see him throwing on a shirt. I'm pretty sure when he confronts her at the beach, he's got pants on.
Yeah, it must happen to him a lot.
Yeah, so this guy, I don't think we get his name until the end of the movie. I just refer to him in my notes as creepy guy. Very funny performance. He's a funny looking person. I don't know what it is about him, but his facial expressions are hilarious when he's eating the fried chicken.
Yeah, he reminds me of Judge Reinhold, to be honest.
Well, his name is Axel.
Exactly, yeah.
Beverly Hills Cop reference, but yeah. I don't know if I see the Judge Reinhold, but he's just weird, and he's got this weird southern voice, southern accent. A very funny performance, but it becomes less funny because they make this character so disturbing. Or maybe it becomes more funny. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, well, you know what? It just becomes... It's makes
weird.
The whole movie strange.
Yes.
Because he's this weird, almost comical guy with this comical face, but then he's tying up a woman and refuses to let her leave his...
Yeah, he's a rapist. He's a kidnapper.
Yeah.
It's so weird. But, okay, so we get the On Her Majesty's Secret Service scene.
This never happened to the other fella.
Where he prevents her suicide at the beach.
Yeah.
Because she's just intentionally ODing on barbiturates or whatever, and he stops her, and then he makes her go drink seawater to throw up or whatever.
And by makes her go drink seawater, he runs her into the ocean and then holds
he's
her head
tossing her
under
around
water.
like a rag doll. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he takes her, and he just takes her to a motel, and he basically holds her captive there. She's still suicidal. She is threatening to kill herself while he's eating fried chicken in her face, which is a very odd scene.
Yeah, and then he's like, go ahead and do it.
And then he threatens to kill her at some point, and then they over time begin to slightly bond. Or I guess they bond after he literally binds her to the bed, breasts exposed. He never.
He's like, "You're my slave now. You're not."
Yeah, we never see him rape her, but we kind of assume it happens, and he's got her tied up and basically makes her beg for her life. And then we also get a couple cutaways to the killer killing the occasional person. We have the smoking hot marine biologist at the aquarium.
Oh yeah,
who loses her glasses when she's running, but then magically has them on when she gets killed.
Yeah.
Shout out to a correct IMDb goof, not an incorrect one. Killer kills a few other people, and it's like, okay, we're clearly setting it up that he's the killer, because they say something like she did see his face and would be able to identify him, but she can't now because she has no memory, but that the killer might be after her. And then there's speculation in the press that the killer has kidnapped her.
Yeah, and then there's also like a scene or two where Axel is talking to Melanie, and he's like, "I gotta go out and blow off some steam."
Yeah, he uses that phrase a few times.
Yeah, and then he'll leave the motel room, and then we'll cut back to him returning, and he's like, "I didn't blow off enough steam, and now I'm gonna rape you," or whatever, right?
That having been said, I could be mistaken, but I believe one of the times we see the killer kill someone is when he has her tied up and is with her in bed. So I feel like
I think he comes back and ties her up.
Oh, maybe, I don't know. And we also get Dr. John Williams is talking about she's suicidal because there was a part of herself that accepted her fate with the killer, and now she's like trying to punish that part of herself, and that's why she's suicidal. The doctor speaking to the press about, doctor-patient confidentiality, that shit's out the window.
Yeah, well, and then you kind of touched on this earlier, but at one point the doctor's like, she'll be able to remember who the killer is if she has to deal with similar trauma.
Right.
And then we immediately cut to Axel having Melanie tied up, and he's like, "You love me, say you love me." And she's like, "I don't, fuck you." And he's like, "You love me." And she goes, "I don't, fuck you." And goes, "You love me." And then you see, like, it appears that
and he makes her say pretty please, not just please.
Yeah. And then it appears that something clicks for her, and you're like, "Oh my god, maybe she's remembering." And then she's like, "I do love you." And you're like, "Oh my god, maybe she's playing a game.
Yes.
Maybe she does remember."
There's a few moments where it's, yeah, because she's, at one point, like, when he comes home, he's asking if she remembers, and she's like, "I do." And that's when she's like kind of coming on to him when she's not tied up.
Yeah.
But as we learn at the end of the film, he's asking potentially if she remembers something different. Yeah, I don't know. It's, again, the whole movie's like a misdirect. But all this stuff with the creepy guy, with Axel tying her up and threatening to rape her and maybe raping her and all this stuff, it's really, really bizarre. It's really bizarre because it's like genuinely disturbing. Mm-hmm. And it's in a movie where we just had this scene with a guy with a massive bulge run out of the restroom and say he got molested in the little boys' room. It's a weird mix of, we get that Italian silliness of the dialogue that's just weird and doesn't make sense, the bizarre acting, the bizarre overdub, but then some of it's actually disturbing. It's a weird thing. But eventually the psychiatrist goes to the press with an ultimatum. He's like, "Hey, creepy killer guy, we know you have Melanie. If you call this number toll free, the police promise not to harm you," or whatever. And that's when, and then they print a police illustration of her in the newspaper. The motel manager sees it and thinks, he calls it in and says, "Hey, I think she's in the room 70. One cop shows up and goes up there, but then he gets knocked out by the creepy guy, by Axel. Again, this is the time period where it appears that she's kind of bonding with him, whether it's Stockholm Syndrome, whether it's something else. The two of them leave together, and it seems like she's kind of voluntarily with him. But then she sees the newspaper and she runs off. And that's actually when Creepy Guy has called the police. They called the toll-free number that they advertised, and he speaks to the psychiatrist and to the cop that he just knocked out 5 seconds ago.
And he's saying things like,
somehow.
Yeah, and he's like, "You're making me do this." And he's got like a weird creepy voice on, right? He's like, "You're making me do this. All of this is happening because of you," or something, right? And then you're like, "Oh my god, this is the killer." And again, at this point, any rational person watching the movie thinks, "Oh, she's got a plan because she remembers that this is the killer, and she's gonna maybe like wait to make a move and kill him or attack him or something." But you're right. She sees the newspaper and she just fucking takes off down the street like a dog chasing
and
after a car.
at this point too, Sherman, who we haven't seen a whole lot of throughout the movie, Sherman and his wife have Melanie's daughter Clarissa.
Yeah.
Sherman's wife is like acting
Unhinged.
weird, and they say something like, oh, they can't have a kid, or maybe they had a kid that died or something, and like, oh, Clarissa's their new daughter.
Yeah.
It's just kind of weird stuff.
And the mom
then
is like, she's
also
we're gonna
calling
keep her
Melanie a
forever.
whore.
Yeah, and she's like, we're going to keep her. That whore doesn't deserve to have a daughter like this.
And Sherman's leaving with a gun, and that's when his wife stops him, and he's like, I'm the only one who can identify the killer. I did see his face. I didn't tell the police anything. I have to go out and find this killer. And he's cruising the streets of Virginia Beach in his car, and he sees Melanie running. He picks her up. He takes her to her house, and then he tells her to lock her in and lock herself in, and then he goes and he says, I'm going to go get help or whatever. And we see him drive up to the phone booth that's literally across the street. I don't know why he got in the car for this. He calls. She answers the phone. It's the killer. Be like, hey, remember me, Melanie, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh no, I need to lock myself in, and she does. But then the killer is once again inside, and this time the killer reveals himself, and it is, of course, Sherman.
Well, and then at this point, Melanie's actually like, I do remember now. I actually remember.
Yes, and this is where we get the flashback, which is very oddly, it's shot, I guess, to be soft focus, to be like a dream, a memory kind of thing. Certain shots, something's in focus. Certain shots, nothing is in focus. The scene where it shows the two of them in bed, she's tied up, nothing is in focus. The scene where he's giving her the knife because he's trying to get her to kill herself.
Yeah.
That scene, the knife is in focus, but then, of course, she swipes at his face with the knife, and that's where the scar comes from. And then we don't see exactly how he ends up staging it to look like he was the savior.
Yeah. Also, I just want to point out, because I just remembered, there's like a multitude of killers' masks in this movie. So at the beginning, they find a mask at the scene, because the cops have a mask in like a plastic bag, right? They're like, this is the mask. You think this would jog her memory? And then we see...
Yeah, I guess there's at least 3.
Yeah, because then we see Sherman, who at this point we don't know is the killer, but he takes like some drunk bimbo from a club back to his place.
The famous scene.
Yeah, and he kills her. But what does he pour on her? Is it like
hot wax?
Yeah. Yeah, and he's got a mask and a glove
makes her into
there.
like a giant candle or something. Yeah, that's a weird scene.
And then there's a third mask later on.
Yeah, and we can get to that because that scene makes no sense either. But so he is going to kill her, and there's been this whole thing where yes, the killer rapes women and then kills them. But as per the first phone call, the killer is obsessed with Melanie. She's different from all the others. He's obsessed with her body. And by the way, she does not, on the surface, when she's wearing clothes, does not look like she's packing quite what she's packing. I'll give her, I'll give that actress some credit
kudos to
there.
her.
Tara Buckman. What else did she do? I assume she's American. Yeah, she's American. Anything else? Oh, she's in the movie Roller Coaster, which I want to see. She's in Hooper, Hooper and Cannonball Run, which are both Burt Reynolds movies. She's in Silent Night, Deadly Night. She plays Ellie. Who's Ellie? You've seen that movie, obviously. I don't know. I wonder who she is in that. I wonder if she's one of the people that works at the toy store or something. She's also in Silent Night, Deadly Night 3. Oh, that's uncredited because it's a flashback, I guess, probably. Because Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 is the last Silent Night, Deadly Night movie to have any continuity.
I think she was the mom? One of the moms?
Oh, maybe.
Eleanor Ellie Chapman was a character in Silent Night, Deadly Night. She was Billy and Ricky Chapman's mom.
Okay, so we see her breasts exposed, and it's a very similar role where she's tortured with a switchblade by a man dressed up as Santa Claus. It's like the same exact roles where she's got her exposed breasts in that movie too. Boy, she had a type. She was typecast, I guess. But anyways, she plays into the killer's whole, like, oh, I'm obsessed with you. And she's like, oh, yeah, I'm so glad you came back. And she's seducing him. Meanwhile, she pulls out a switchblade from his pocket and stabs him in the crotch. Oh, yeah. He's backing away, but he still has his gun, and he picks it up to aim it at her. And that's when, out of nowhere, Axel jumps through the window, and I think slightly earlier than this, they said something about Axel, and I think that's the first time we got this guy's name. But Axel jumps through the window just randomly and shoots him. And then reunites with his wife or ex-wife, because Axel was a police officer who was fired from the force
for drinking on the job.
Oh, is that? Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I thought maybe for stalking women in restrooms, but they revealed, the psychiatrist reveals to the press that this whole thing was a ruse. That not that they knew the killer was Sherman, but that they knew the killer would strike again, and they knew if they had her kind of reliving the same trauma that she would be able to identify the killer. And yet the ruse kind of didn't work, because at the end of the day it was the killer coming back to her that made her remember. It wasn't Sherman torturing her and treating her like an asshole necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then they say like, oh, I can confidently say Axel will be back on the force, and he might even be looking at a promotion. So good for him for his Kentucky Fried Chicken eating ass.
Yeah, it's so fucking dumb.
And then we get the scene, and meanwhile it's been Christmas time. It's around Christmas time. This entire movie, we see fallen leaves. I know, again, Florida, and the openings, or not the opening scene, but the first scene we see of Melanie and Clarissa, Sherman gives her a Christmas present. And at this point, we see Melanie in bed with Axel, and there's this whole, like, oh, you forgive me, right? Kind of thing. And I'm thinking,
and she's like, of course I do. Oh, I love you.
Yeah, I would never forgive this asshole. And then we see Clarissa opening her present in slow motion, where she jumps on her bed and like bounces like 4 feet up in the air in slow motion. It looks like a lot of fun. And inside this box, of course, is the Freddy Krueger mask. And she puts it on and adopts the energy, the powers of the serial killer, because she's in the mirror, she's doing her own creepy voice. Remember me, Mrs. Beck, or whatever. And it's like, what the fuck is this ending? Because that's the end of the movie. Yeah, that's the end of the movie. It is implied at the end that the mask has the secret killer powers of Sherman or whatever imbued.
Sherman powers.
Yes, the Shermanator. Yeah, so that's the end of the movie. The ending makes absolutely no sense. Like I said, this is a Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff, at least with the appearance of the killer, maybe not with much else, not a whole lot story-wise. But yeah, that is Night Killer. Jim, you already said you kind of enjoyed it. Yeah, how did you like it? Just talk more about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just, I liked it a lot. It's just such a dumb movie, and it's not intended to be lighthearted, but because it's so strange, and I guess there's probably like a language barrier, right? I mean, everybody's speaking
for a
English.
Film in English.
Yeah.
It's not too often you can say that.
No, but you know what I mean, though, right?
But it's the Italians. They dub it in whatever yeah. There again, whoever was writing this dialogue was not writing for it to be in English originally.
But there's just so many strange, interesting things that happen, and the twist is actually like a genuine twist. Especially when you realize that this guy that has been tying Melanie up the whole movie and treating her like shit is her ex-husband, and the whole thing is just weird, but it's so weird that it's funny. You know, like, it's a genuinely enjoyable watch. And then there you have, like, those dumb lines, like the, I was just molested in the little boy's room. And none of the acting...
Well, you kill yourself there. I'm gonna eat. It's all about the delivery, too, that actor.
And just like all the... like, when he runs up to her on the beach and she's killing herself, he's like, he kicks all the bottles. He's like, what are you doing?
What are you doing? Yeah, that's this funny line delivery.
And she's like, I'm killing myself.
Axel's played by Peter Hooton, who is American. Okay, he's most notable for being the lead in the television film Doctor Strange from the 70s. Have I seen him in anything else? A lot of TV stuff. Oh, he is in... I've never seen this movie, but he is in The Inglourious Bastards, the Italian war movie that Quentin Tarantino took the title for. He's also in 2020 Texas Gladiators. Okay, so I have seen this. So it looks like primarily TV, and then as far as films are concerned...
And shit.
doing that Italian stuff, you know?
Yeah. But you know what, though? This is like a good, bad movie. This is what this podcast was made for. I don't know if you feel the same way that I do, but it was just like...
I do in parts. I don't know how to feel about this movie overall because, yes, I do enjoy a lot of the goofier elements of the film, but the film gets so into the torture of this woman, and it's not always physical torture, it's emotional torture of this woman.
That part.
That stuff isn't fun to me. I love the Peter Hooton performance. He is hilarious. His facial expressions are so weird. He has the weirdest lines. The vocal performance is funny to me. But at a certain point, you know, the little boy's room scene is wonderful. That's the best scene in the movie. But it's kind of like after that scene where he's like threatening her and then he's eating fried chicken. After that scene, I didn't really like anything with him and her because that was just more disturbing and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I did like the scene with the fried chicken, though, because it was such a bizarre choice when she's threatening to kill herself and he's just, like, aggressively eating chicken. It was such a weird decision to film that scene that way.
I agree with you that stuff is disturbing, all the rape and torture. But then you get other awesome side characters like that black cop, who's mouthing off to the...
See, he didn't do a whole lot for me. He's fine.
No, but he had that great line where he's yelling at the hotel manager, where he told him to fuck off, or he called him a bitch or something. That was great.
Called him a creep.
And then you have Dr. Willow, who's the psychiatrist guy, who's just like, he's clearly like Donald Pleasance-esque character.
Yeah.
Then all the stuff that happened at the aquarium, I thought was great.
I liked that. I like the aquarium scene.
Well, even just the way that the killer killed by just punching a hole through their stomachs was awesome.
That is so dumb. That is fun. And again, there's no explanation for it. It's clearly a rubber mask. I don't know how he's able to do this.
Yeah, rubber mask, rubber hand.
Well, and also, and I noticed this in particular with the woman in the aquarium. You see it briefly, but there's almost like it looks like pumpkin pie filling or something in her body. Like, you don't see guts. You just
no,
see,
you're
like,
right.
Goo.
Well, she was a redhead, so
not pumpkin pie filling, but like filling of a pumpkin.
Oh, yes.
No, she wasn't a redhead. She was blonde.
I thought she was a redhead in the aquarium.
I thought she was blonde, just like the prostitute Sarah Jessica Parker lady.
Well, and also too, but then you get like dumb lines that they could have shown this, and I guess they probably didn't because of like ratings or whatever, you know. But when they find the body of the woman at the aquarium, they're like, "Oh, the killer chopped her up and fed her to the fish."
Yeah, but then it looks like they're pulling out a full body when you see it on the stretcher. I mean, it's covered.
Yeah, it's just such a stupid, goofy movie that I don't really think I've seen a stupid, goofy horror movie that I've enjoyed this much since maybe like Killer Workout, to be honest.
Oh, wow. Not even Pieces? Come on. Pieces?
I forgot about
Done
Pieces.
those more recently. No, I see where you're coming from. I'm not fully there because the disturbing stuff is so... Not that it's well done, but that it is disturbing because I feel awful for Tara Buckman. I do. Like, the actress. Not even the character. It's just like I feel awful that they're just doing this to her. And it's all like, I can't forget that this is just made by a bunch of Italian schlockmeisters, and it's just like, it's different if it's made by, like, I don't know, it's different, and you know, it's like Reanimator, that scene with Barbara Crampton, and it's like knowing more about Stuart Gordon, knowing more about Barbara Crampton, that there was like, it just feels like the actress was more in control than she is here. And it's just like, it's good. Tara Buckman, this American working with these Italian directors, she probably told them many times, like, I hate this, I'm not comfortable with any of it, and they just don't understand English.
And they're just
so
like, take your clothes off.
The movie crosses a line for me where overall the highs of this movie are fantastic. The director forgetting her lines is very funny. A few of the kill scenes are pretty good. The stupidity of punching through someone's chest is great. The molested in the little boy's room, the fried chicken scene, those are that's all fantastic. The rest of the movie I kind of hated, though. Overall, like, if I were to give this movie like a rating out of 10, it sounds like you're at like the 8 or 9.
I'm at an 11.
I'm going like 5 or 6 because I'm not sure what to make of it overall.
Yeah, see, I'd go with like a 7.
I'm very entertained by certain things in this movie, but overall the movie left me with kind of a bad taste in my mouth.
Well, you're saying when Axel
like I'm drinking seawater to get rid of the barbiturates that I just swallowed.
Yeah. Wait, you're saying when Axel dives through a glass door, that wasn't fucking awesome?
You're right. I forgot about that one. That moment's great. That reminded me of Hard Ticket to Hawaii when the guy takes the motorcycle through the window and shoots the snake with the bazooka.
Yeah, I'm probably
Forgot about
sitting
that
at like
moment. I'll give you that one.
I'm sitting at like a 7 or an 8 with this movie. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
If I ever have a friend over who says I want to watch a funny movie, I'm gonna put this on.
Okay. You're not going to watch Splits again?
Yeah.
All right, so Jim, Dawn of the Dead, Night Killer, which of the two films do you prefer?
I guess I prefer Dawn of the Dead, even though I really enjoyed Night Killer. Dawn of the Dead is certainly enjoyable to watch. The characters are interesting, the story's interesting, but also I think Romero's sneaking in some jabs at society, and he's making points through his movie with silly things other than pies in the face. I think it's a well done movie, and it's a classic for a reason. Whereas Night Killer is this weird rapey movie that unfortunately has a main character who just gets raped throughout the whole movie. And that's unfortunate. And yeah, even though it is funny. How about you, Patrick?
Yeah, I don't have to think twice about this. It's clearly Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead is an excellent film. Again, I don't think it's the masterpiece that Night of the Living Dead is, but I still very much enjoy it. Don't have too many complaints about it. Again, some of the humor goes a little too far for me. But that's like worth noting in that like the stuff we liked about Night Killer are the goofier elements. Dawn of the Dead has goofy elements that are pretty enjoyable for the most part. But yeah, it's an easy one. It's Dawn of the Dead. How do you think, though, that this works as a drive-in double feature?
Well, see, I think it works really well, actually, because we're just extending the goofy stuff from Dawn of the Dead with Night Killer.
Yeah, but that's not all Night Killer is, though, because Night Killer, there is the disturbing stuff. There is the psychological horror element that doesn't really work.
No, and even though that's the case, I think Night Killer is kind of like a shit movie that doesn't really work on any level other than in the slightly disturbing sense. Dawn of the Dead is disturbing, and it does make you question things about society. The goofier elements in that movie, I think, kind of detract from the movie, though, but really, again, I'm just thinking of like the pie in the face thing. I'm like, why is that there? The rest of it's fine, but then you come over to Night Killer, which is just such a train wreck of a movie. That just made me laugh the whole time. Other than the rape stuff, that part wasn't fun. But
which is like half the movie. She's tied up for a very long time, man. I don't know what to tell you. I think we saw different cuts of Night Killer. Or
maybe, yeah.
I don't think Night Killer has as much enjoyable in it as you say it does.
I just really enjoyed watching it. I don't know. I don't know why I like this so much.
Because she's not tied up for half the movie, but half the movie is in that motel room. And
yeah,
that stuff, the exception of the fried chicken scene, is all kind of like, I don't like watching this.
No, yeah. Well, I don't know. I think they work, though. They're both a little disturbing. They're both kind of goofy.
I'll say it's a good drive-in double feature. Something that I think you kind of started saying but didn't quite say was that Dawn of the Dead, some of the goofiness doesn't quite work, might detract from the movie. The goofiness enhances Night Killer. Night Killer, if it doesn't have the little boys' room scene, the fried chicken scene, the diving through the window moment,
and the dumb
director
mask,
forgetting her lines, if it doesn't have all that stuff, we would not be recommending Night Killer because it really is just like a subpar psychological horror film.
No, I agree.
It has those moments of goofiness that certainly elevate it into that, like, these Italians don't know what they're doing category. I also think just for the Italian connection is kind of fun too, because we have this movie that it's not directed by Dario Argento. Dario Argento is involved obviously in Dawn of the Dead, and Dario Argento, along with Mario Bava, to me, the pinnacle of Italian horror filmmakers. And then you get Claudio Fragasso and Bruno Mattei that are towards the bottom. They're buried under the floorboards as far as Italian horror filmmakers go, and this is their product. That's kind of fun. And then, of course, you get the connection of Bruno Mattei directly involved in Dawn of the Dead ripoffs. I like that aspect. And that's really all I got. I don't have too many thematic connections, anything like that. But yeah, I think it's a fairly fun double feature.
Let's be honest, most zombie movies end on kind of a bleak note. And then you get to jump right into this stupid, weird Italian-American venture that, just made me laugh the whole time anyways. So that was nice.
Okay, so here is what we've got going on next time. We have the return of Jackie Chan, as promised. we have Police Story, the 1985 Hong Kong classic, and a film that I've mentioned numerous times throughout this season, the Japanese spaghetti western film Sukiyaki Western Django, directed by fan favorite Takashi Miike, also featuring a Quentin Tarantino cameo. So those are our two films, Police Story, Sukiyaki Western Django. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's what we'll have next time. Please join us. In the meantime, check out our YouTube channel. I'm going to be continuing to
Patrick's making great videos. Check him out.
Edited versions, like video versions of all of our podcast episodes. I'm still working on the Night of the Living Dead one. Check us out on Patreon. And yeah, anything for you to plug, Jim, other than your hair?
Fuck you. No, that's it.
You got the Scott Reiniger hairline going.
I do. Don't bring it
No,
up.
you don't. It's not that bad. It's that guy. Yeah, it's but yeah. Anyways, Jim, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, buddy. I'll talk to you later.